During World War II, inside German prisons, there was a disturbing execution method used to take the heads off thousands of people who dared to speak out against the government and their dictator. The Fallbeil, or falling axe as it translates to, was an all-metal guillotine, inspired by the French guillotine, and this was so ruthless that experienced executioners could take the head off someone in a matter of seconds. One executioner bragged that within just 5 seconds of the condemned entering the chamber of death, their head would be taken off and then lie in a basket at the bottom of the slanted blade. The Fallbeil was for the Nazis a silent and quick method of dealing with their enemies, and many people who did not hold the same political beliefs as them were thrust under the slanted blade. The executioners, who were paid a bonus fee for every head they took using the device, became very rich. But why was the Fallbeil, or falling axe, so bad and horrific? The Fallbeil, or Kopf machine, which translates as head machine, became the preferred method of execution in some German states from the 19th century. Over time, the device became more effective and efficient, and it was made from all metal, and they also used heavier blades than French guillotines, and could use shorter uprights, meaning they could be taken down easily, and then guillotines could be reassembled in a different prison when it was needed. A curtain would usually shield the release of the blade on the condemned's neck, and when the blade was released, the head would fall into a basket or bucket below. Nazi Germany used the device from 1933, when the Nazis came into power, until the end of the Second World War, and it's estimated that around 16,500 people, at least, lost their heads on the Fallbeil, with 10,000 of these executions actually taking place in the final 2 years of World War II. Those who were targeted were resistors to Hitler and the Nazis, and with this they eliminated communists and enemies to their politics. Women and even elderly people suffered in the same way as others, and also there were teenagers who went to their deaths on the device. Now, one reason why it was so horrific and terrible was that it became the favoured execution tool of the Nazis. Firing squads were used for military offences, but the Fallbeil became the primary civilian execution method. The Nazis would use it more than any previous German government. Hitler himself ordered the expansion of the execution facilities when he came into power and installed different Fallbeils inside different prisons all around Germany, including at Plötzensee prison in Berlin and Stadelheim prison in Munich. The fact it was used on civilians and not ordinary criminals was also terrifying. These were people whose only crime was not agreeing with the Nazi mentality and the policies of Hitler, but of course, to do something about this was treason in the eyes of the Nazis. Some who faced the Fallbeil included members of the White Rose, a resistance group and movement which asked people to think about what they were doing supporting the Nazi regime. After being arrested, Sophie Scholl, a young woman, and her brother Hans, as well as other members of the White Rose, were executed by Fallbeil at Stadelheim. The executioner that day, Johann Reichardt, who operated the device, would claim that Sophie Scholl was the bravest person he ever had to take the head off. The executions were swift, secret and ordered by the government. Nazi guillotine executions were designed to feel like an industrial process. Condemned people were often told only hours beforehand that they were about to die, and they were then transported to a special execution room, and some compared this to a slaughterhouse. Inside Plötzensee prison, the guillotine was found in a courtyard in a brick building, and this also had a hanging beam inside, meaning that often when those people went to the guillotine, they actually witnessed bodies hanging from the wooden beam before they were secured onto the guillotine. Many of the trials that condemned people were also predetermined and were aimed at purely embarrassing and shaming the individual, and often cruel judges, such as Roland Freisler, screeched and screamed at the victims before he then sentenced them to death. The Fallbeil became a cold killing machine, fast, silent, and almost invisible to the public, and this created a significant amount of fear. Now, as mentioned, the Fallbeil was engineered in a way for maximum efficiency. It was a device tweaked to enable executioners to perform their jobs very quickly. There was a shorter drop for the heavier blade than a French guillotine, and also there was a bench with a sliding board to position the prisoner. But some executioners didn't bother with this, and they found that they could take the head off quicker if assistants just wrestled with the condemned, then held them under the blade, which was then released. Some execution chambers were even fitted with drains, allowing the rooms to be hosed off and cleaned quicker, getting rid of all the blood, to then bring in the next person. This created, in a sense, an assembly line of victims who were all waiting to face their deaths. But many people who suffered this fate hadn't committed what many would deem to be a serious crime like murder. The Scholls were executed for writing pamphlets. Others were reported to the Gestapo for flippant defeatist comments, which could cost them their lives, and some were even confronted with the device if they even listened or dared to listen to a foreign radio station. The Fallbeil was a powerful sign against people undermining the war effort. It was also used inside occupied lands, and not just in Germany. In particular, inside of Czechoslovakia, the German guillotine was brought into Pankrak prison, and this would take the heads off people who were accused of being members of the Czech resistance and in opposing the occupation of their lands. It was clear to people living under these Nazi occupations that they needed to remain in submission and be quiet, or the Fallbeil will be coming for them next. One of the biggest horrors of the Fallbeil was the execution system it existed within. In a final twist of cruelty for the people of Germany, the families and relatives of executed prisoners were ordered to pay a number of fees for the fact their loved one had been executed. Mothers, fathers and wives were forced to pay a fee for the cost of imprisonment, for the cost of the trial, and also for the cost of the execution itself. The Nazis even billed families the cost of the stamp that the letter was sent with. Receiving one of these bills after the death of a loved one added to the terror and also humiliation. The youngest person to face the German guillotine was Helmuth Hübener, who in October 1942 was executed for his opposition to the Nazi regime. He wrote pamphlets encouraging his friends and peers to not give in to Hitler. In one of these he bravely claimed, and I quote, "German boys, do you know the country without freedom, the country of terror and tyranny? Yes, you know it well, but are afraid to talk about it. They have intimidated you to such an extent that you don't dare talk for fear of reprisals. Yes, you are right, it is Germany, Hitler Germany. Through their unscrupulous terror tactics against old and young, men and women, they have succeeded in making you spineless puppets to do their bidding." Hübener was arrested by the Gestapo eventually, and despite being just 17 years old, he was tried as an adult. When he faced the judges, he claimed, and I quote, "Now I must die, even though I have committed no crime. So now it's my turn, but your turn will come." He was found guilty of conspiracy to commit high treason and was condemned to death. It was shocking, even for the Nazis, to sentence an underage defendant to death, but nevertheless, Helmuth Hübener was executed at 8:13 p.m. on the 27th of October 1942 by the German Fallbeil, despite being just 17 years old. So, to finish, the Fallbeil became the feared execution method of ordinary people inside of Nazi Germany for many reasons. It was efficient and industrial and widely used across many cities and towns on innocent people who just had different political beliefs to their overlords. It was a rapid and ruthless execution method that could just take seconds, and it was also designed to humiliate as well as kill. The Fallbeil was truly terrifying. Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, maybe click subscribe. Once again, thank you so much for giving your time up to watch one of these videos.